Good morning and welcome back to the channel. So we've had a very early start this morning. We were up at 5 out the door and we've drove all the way up to Leighton Moss in Cairnforth, just north of Lancaster. And we've come here with one intention, and that is to photograph the bearded tits, or the bearded reedling, because they're actually not part of the tit family. They are a reedling, like many of the other reedling species. So hopefully what we're going to do is we're going to go down to where they put the grit trays out and we're going to get you some fantastic photographs and some video. It is, however, raining. It's forecast to stop, so fingers crossed it brightens up a little bit and it's not a washout of a day. So come along for the journey and see what I see. We've arrived at Causeway Hide and we've just had a little look through the viewing platform just to the side of me here. You probably just see Jen in the background still looking through, and you can see the otters. The otters are out hunting on the water, and there's been lots of sightings of the otters just recently, and a gentleman, John, was it Winters? Don't know. Definitely John. Has just been explaining that they've got 2 young, so it's there's a female with two kits, and there is a male dotting about as well. Obviously keeps his distance from the female with the 2 kits. So we'll probably go in here, have a sit down and see what we can see if anything comes a little bit closer, and hopefully bring you some video and some images. We've spent about 20 minutes in the Causeway Hide, and we've seen a couple of buzzards, a marsh harrier, and we could see the otters, but they were a long way away. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move on down to the lower hide. The light's still really quite low, so really it's not optimal for taking photographs at the minute. So we're going to move down to the lower hide, see what we can see there, and then we'll start to make our way back up, hopefully to catch sight of the bearded tits. Fantastic. What a lovely way to start your day, looking at 2 otters happily hunting away and catching an eel. Got a little bit of video which I'll pop up on the screen now for you to see. Got an eel.
They've got an eel?
Yeah, one on the left has. light was less than ideal this morning for the bearded tits, hence the reason we went down to the lower hide. But we're now going to make our way back up there. We've already seen a marsh tit hunting through the reeds, so I'm optimistic that maybe the bearded tits may have arrived. So this is the first outing, the true proper wildlife outing for my new lens. And as I said in my last video, I've purchased myself the Z, or Z, depending on where you come from, 400 2.8 with a built-in 1.4 teleconverter. The first thing that I notice about it in comparison to my 500 is the weight difference. It's considerably lighter, and as a result it's really easy to hand hold. I'm carrying it today on a Peak Design strap, which I use with my 500mm lens, no problem whatsoever. I've got my tripod, and the reason that I've brought my tripod, despite me just saying to you that I can hand hold this lens, is that when you're photographing the bearded tits, you need to have your lens pointed at a set location for long periods of time. Now you could just stand there with your camera, and when they arrive lift your camera up, but when you're using a big lens and you're kind of static like that, it always makes far more sense to put it on a tripod if you've got one. So I use a Series 5 with a fluid gimbal head on the top of it, and that just allows me to get some nice steady shots. So we're just waiting for the bearded tits to arrive. So they put out grit trays, and the reason why they put out grit trays is the bearded tit, or bearded reedling as it probably should be known, throughout most of the year eats insects in amongst the reeds. But when it gets to this time of year, the amount of insect life is depleted, and so at that point they switch their diet to seed. But they can't digest the seed, so what they rely on is grit. And for a long time they were picking up little pieces of stone off the paths here, and they digest the stone and the grit, and that goes into their stomach and it grinds down the seeds and makes them digestible. So what the RSPB have done is, in recognition of the fact that they eat grit, is they've put out grit trays. And these are just simple like wooden bird tables that you would get in your garden, and what they put on top of it is the grit. So what we do is we wait at these grit trays, and we wait for the bearded tits to arrive, and they'll come out through the reeds. Now that presents a number of challenges to the photographer. The first of all is you've got a very contrasty background, because you've got those vertical lines of the reeds, and your camera autofocus system loves contrast, so it will often pick up the reeds instead of picking up the birds. So you've got to be really quick on your autofocusing. Now the Nikon Z9 does pretty well at picking up animals and animal eye recognition, but what I'll often do when I'm photographing the bearded tits is, if it's struggling to identify them, that's when I use my single point focus. And so I have my programmable buttons on the front of the camera, and the top one is programmed so that it switches to single point focus. So if ever I'm struggling and it's jumping to the background, to the reeds, I'll use that single point to nail that focus. Now what you're looking for when you're photographing bearded tits, the classic pose is what I call the Van Damme pose. So if you remember from the movies, Jean-Claude Van Damme would sit with his legs in the splits across two chairs. Well, the bearded tits do something very similar. They'll grab reeds and they'll have their legs horizontal either side. And then the male bearded tit has got what looks like a handlebar moustache. He's got these big black triangles that drop down either side of his beak. So what I'm looking for, and what I'm hoping to achieve, is to get a photograph of that male bearded tit in that Van Damme pose with an unobstructed view of it. So I've not got any reeds in front of it, and the background is as reasonably diffused as I can possibly get it. The female bearded tits are also, I think, often overlooked, but a beautiful, beautiful bird, and definitely worth photographing. So we've got the bearded tits here. At the moment there's about 10 and they just keep flitting in and out of the reeds to the grit trays. Absolutely fantastic. Well, that was absolutely fantastic. I would say at times there was probably 10 to 12 bearded tits on the grit trays. I'm going to be honest with you, I've done more photographing than I have videoing. I want to try out this new lens. So I've got a little bit of video for you guys, but most of it's going to be in stills. And if I've got anything decent, I'll pop it up on the screen now for you to see. One of the things that I've done whilst I was waiting for the bearded tits to arrive is to entertain myself with dragonflies. They're a fantastic little species to try and photograph because they're fast moving. But one of the things that you'll notice about dragonflies, if you keep watching them, is that they have a set pattern that they'll cover over the top of the marsh or pond or lake that they're covering, and they seem to rotate around this set routine over and over again. So after watching them for a period of time, you can work out where that pattern is. And at that point, just get yourself in position and wait for them to arrive. And I think you'll enjoy the results. So we said we were going to come to RSPB Leighton Moss with one thing in mind, and that was the bearded tits. And we've definitely achieved that, There are lots more things to see at Leighton Moss. While we've been here, we've seen the otters this morning, we've seen marsh harrier, there's an osprey been fleeting about to and from, always at a long enough range really for us not to get anything in the way of video or photographs, but it's there and it's still there, which it's unusual. I think it's the mild weather that stopped it from migrating south back to Africa where it really should be on its way to at this time of year. If you like this video, probably a little bit shorter than normal, please give it a like, consider giving me a comment below, and if there's somewhere that you think that I should be visiting, please drop that in the comment also. And until next time, ta-ra.